welcome to Sketchbook Club. Today we're going to be drawing and painting a beautiful scene of a tree, a gnarly old tree covered in blossom in the night with three owls sitting on one of the branches. Very difficult to do without a reference or a template, and that's what I'm going to provide. A sheet of owls, lots of different owls to choose from, and a sheet of blossom so that you can copy and kind of be inspired by it really. And then the gnarly tree for that transfer, we're going to draw over it, rub over the back, so you've got a template to work from. So for this session you'll need a sharp pencil and some paints. I'm using a set of gouache paints. This is for the blossom, not the background. The background, I'm going to use acrylic. So this is quite important. So I'm just using a blue and a little dot of yellow and a little dot of black to get that quite inky night sky. Important not just to use the blue, because I think if you use the actual colours from the tube, it can sometimes look a bit sort of childlike and sort of loses a bit of sophistication. So we're going to mix a lovely inky blue. And the reason we're using gouache is it works so well on top of that sort of very sort of sheeny, plasticky coating of the acrylic, and it's really effective. So to start with, you're going to take that tree. It's really hard to get that composition. And again, I want to take away that sort of fear. You're kind of staring at this page and thinking, so I've just got to draw a tree and some owls. It's really hard to get it kind of so that it sits comfortably on the page. So this is what this is for. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw over the tree. Using a sharp pencil and pressing quite firmly, because you want all the lines that you're making to come out onto the page when you transfer it. Draw over each little gnarly branch and twig and make sure you don't miss any branches out. Everything that you draw onto this tree, all these marks with your pencil, will come out onto your page when you rub over the back, and make it kind of really kind of gnarly, because the more gnarly it is, the more interesting an image it'll be when you transfer it onto your page. So when you've done the whole of the tree, you're then going to position it on the page so that the position of the owls is going to be here and all the blossom is going to be on the rest of the tree. So hold it firmly in place. And then you're just going to rub over the edges. It shouldn't take that long. Don't feel you have to go over it painstakingly. So when you're scribbling over it, you might want to kind of turn the pencil around every now and then. It doesn't have to be sharp. It's really the edge of the pencil that's going to make that tree transfer onto the page. Don't use the point of the pencil, because the pencil might tear the paper. So you're just going to rub over the whole of the tree, making sure that all the marks that you made on the reverse are drawn over so that it is transferred onto your sketchbook page. And don't worry if you want to check how it's going, just lift it up. Right, so once you've done that, you can see that the tree is successfully transferred onto that page. The middle bits, if you've missed any out, you can tell roughly what's going on and add in the bits that were hard to rub over because of that sort of gatefold of the book. So the next thing to do is to sharpen your pencil and roughly draw in the owls. I've put some sort of various sizes. It's quite nice if you have some kind of slightly different shaped owls. This is a lovely example where there's a very sweet little baby owl and then a kind of larger and an even larger one. You could either draw around them and trace and kind of rub over the back, or use them as reference and just sort of where the branch is, just draw in the owls. Don't worry about any of the detail at the moment, it's just the shapes of the owls and their wings and obviously their ears. I've just sort of roughly copied the outline of this one, and then I'm going to do a much simpler version, something like that. And again, don't worry too much about sticking to it too rigidly. And then I'm going to do a very small owl here, like that. So really up to you which ones you want to choose and how simple you want to make it. So you should have a sort of pencil working out of the whole page and how it's going to look. So the whole gnarly tree and the 3 owls. So now, mixing with your acrylics, you're going to take the blue as your base, and what you're going to do is, I said this before, but it is a bit like cooking. You'll kind of, you kind of add a bit of salt to the stew and see how it looks, and if it's not salty enough, you add more, and it's a bit like that. So try not to kind of be too sort of zealous at the start. And we want it a kind of inky, really nice inky blue rather than a bright blue. So I'm adding a bit of yellow to give it a kind of a slightly less vibrant blue feel. And then I've got a little bit of black, and again just adding it until you've got, that's a really lovely deep blue. So I'm happy with that blue. So using this is going to take quite a long time, but so relaxing actually, really lovely cathartic thing to do. Using your thin brush, we're just going to go over the whole of the background, leaving the tree white, so all of those little branches. And it's up to you how sort of neatly or accurately you want to go over the kind of background. Don't worry at all if you go over and you sort of cut off a branch with your paintbrush. It doesn't matter, we can either lose the branch or just paint it in again. But the reason we're going over it first is because the gouache paint, when you're painting the branches, will be really bright and stand out. And in fact, some people have found that once they have painstakingly painted all over the background, they were happy with the tree all in white. I'll show you an example here. And it can look really graphic and really vibrant without any paint on it at all. So it's up to you entirely how you want to play it. And as ever, it's your sketchbook. Don't feel you have to kind of follow the rules, if you like, and make it your own. So once you've gone over the whole of it, a good method is with a blank piece of paper underneath, then you can be a little bit less sort of self-conscious about it and be really generous and fill in all the white spaces with your larger brush. So I won't sit here and paint the whole thing because you'll be absolutely bored just watching me, but you get the idea. So here's one. Here's one I did earlier. And in fact, my owls have slightly changed. So it's very scrappy because done in a rush, but it just sort of shows all these lovely details, and this is what you'll end up with. So once you've painted the whole of your spread, it's time to paint the owls. This person's drawn the owls with coloured pencils. So again, it's entirely up to you. So what you're going to do is you're going to get a plate and you're literally going to dot. You're making a little palette really, it's quite satisfying to do. You're just going to dot the colours that you're thinking of doing your owls all around the plate. Lots of white because we're going to make sure the owls really stand out. And to be honest, acrylic dries really fast. So once you've created this sort of palette, your page should be dry. I'm putting in some quite warm colours to contrast. It's interesting that this is a particularly successful spread and the owls are quite sort of pinky. So think about colours that are going to really jar and contrast that lovely inky blue. Gouache is amazing paint because even when it dries hard, unlike acrylic, which is plastic based, if the acrylic paint dries hard on your palette, you can never use it again. And if you're using a china plate, you can just almost sort of peel it off. But gouache is great because if it dries, all you have to do is add water. It's a bit like those solid watercolour squares in a watercolour set, and you can reuse them. If you have got your little palette of dots and you want to go back to it and continue with the owls, etc., it's fine. You can just continue using those paints. So you're going to start sort of mixing and choosing some nice colours, painting the kind of base for the owl. I'm going to do this little one first. And just adding to it, adding detail. Later, when it's a bit dry, will be easy because it's got that lovely chalky finish. All the time making sure that everything's covered. I've chosen very different owls. There are some quite realistic ones, but there are some very stylised ones, which is quite important because this is an illustration, and it needs to have some character. So try and think about that when you're choosing your owls or when you're adding detail. So looking at your reference, you could add some more sort of colours around the sort of head, or add some details. Here we've got some little flowers, just, sort of embellish it. Or the other thing you can do, add a bit of white to make it light, and then you can add detail on top once you've done your background paint, and make sure the paint's nice and thick and it'll sit quite well on top. Feel free to add aspects of some owls to other owls. So for instance, I love these eyes. So I'm going to copy those eyes for my owl. Looking at some of these examples, great about gouache is that it just is that perfect sort of background base for adding detail. This is done in a kind of fine liner pen, but also with pencil. It sits really well if your gouache paint, the background is really dry. If you wanted to put some detail with a sort of sharp pencil over the top, and you'll notice she's done exactly that. She's added some detail with a sort of lighter yellow. These owls have got quite sad faces, but what she's done, which is a really nice little tip actually, is if you're going to do the eyes, when they're dry, if you just use a very sort of fine brush and add a little dot of white, it gives them that kind of spooky, sort of lifelike feel about them. So when the owls are all painted, you'll have this sort of white tree with this lovely blue background and these beautiful coloured owls. It's now time to either paint the tree or leave it white. It looks lovely white as well, and this person's chosen to leave it white, but you could just paint in some detail, or using a brown pencil, put in some more of the barks, knobbly detail, and leave that white. But if you are, I would use quite a pale brown as a base, and then maybe adding a little bit of purple for the under branches. So you'll end up with this lovely streaky effect. And the lovely thing is because the gouache is lovely and chalky, you get this really nice difference between the sort of shiny background and then this wonderful smooth gouache tree. So once that's done, it's so satisfying, this bit. It's so lovely to do. You're going to start to mix some blossom colours. So I'm going to use quite a lot of white again. Sometimes if you're buying a set of gouache, it's quite useful to buy an additional larger tube of white, because you sort of get through it a lot quicker than the whole set. So using white with a little dot of red, I'm doing pink blossom, but I've seen some beautiful pale blue ones or yellow. They just all look so stunning. So there are some blossom images here for reference. Just sort of think about how many petals they have, or kind of just sort of think about the fact that how they are sort of clustered on a branch. And then you're just going to put sort of dots really, making these flowers. Try and make the paint quite thick, because the thicker it is, the more kind of vibrant it'll be, and it'll really stand out against that lovely inky blue. And you can see, it's just so effective. Now this is if you're not painting the tree, which is entirely up to you. So lovely to do. It's a little bit like sort of after you've iced the cake, putting on the hundreds and thousands, and it's so satisfying and just looks so lovely. This is so beautiful. This has just been covered in blossom. It really stands out. And actually a nice idea is using a darker reddy pink is to add a little bit of detail in the middle, just a few strokes with your brush, and it just gives it that really sort of blossom-like feel. And in fact, this person's put a few green leaves, and it just feels like a really lovely spring tree. Do you know, the hardest thing I find is knowing when to stop. I would sort of don't quite know whether I finished, so that's a tough call, but you'll know. I think you'll know, and you'll think, right, I'm just going to leave it, and it's done. If you want to add any more detail once the owls are dried as well, after it's all finished, then embellishments with pen or a little bit of pencil. But basically you should end up with this, it's such a lovely spread, this beautiful, beautiful spread with all the lovely blossom flowers. If you want to share this so that you can see other people's ideas or just show everyone your beautiful page, then use the hashtag Sketchbook Club Owls, and then we'll all have a look and I can see it too.